Welcome back. Last time we were introduced to ecosystems, abiotic factors, and biotic factors. So if you don't know what those things are, you should go back and rewatch the first video for this unit. We're continuing learning about the standard MS-LS2-1, and today you're going to differentiate between living and non-living things and describe the cause-effect relationships between abiotic and biotic factors. So we're going to start by doing a little game trying to figure out if something is biotic or abiotic. Then we're going to look at some rules to tell us if something is living or non-living. And the last thing we're going to do today are some word problems. And we're going to try to figure out how are the abiotic factors affecting the biotic factors. Next time, we're going to learn about how living resources affect other living things. So let's get started. So I'm going to pull up some pictures of different things you would find in nature, and I want you to decide whether it's abiotic or biotic. If you have a little pen and paper, you can write down your answers and we'll check them at the end. So first one is water, just pure water. Is it abiotic or biotic? What about fish? Abiotic or biotic? How about the algae that grows on top of ponds, pond scum? What about rocks? Are bacteria abiotic or biotic? What about mushrooms that grow on dead logs? Are they abiotic or are they biotic? How about sunlight? A snowstorm? What about trees? Is moss abiotic or biotic? Well, let's check our answers. Okay, let's see if you got them all right. Water is abiotic. Yes, it moves and sometimes it almost seems so lively, but water itself is just a chemical, okay? It is non-living. Sometimes things live inside of water, but water itself is non-living. Fish are living, so they are biotic. Algae is also biotic. The algae that I showed you in the picture was growing, right, on top of the pond. Rocks are non-living. Bacteria are living, they're biotic. So are mushrooms. Sunlight's non-living. Snowstorms are non-living. Trees are living. And moss is living. Okay, so if you got some of these wrong, or you're kind of confused about how do we tell if something is living or non-living, abiotic or biotic, well, here are some rules to help you out. You can determine if something is living using these rules. They have to have the ability to reproduce. That means make more of themselves, like have babies or split and create daughter cells, whatever. They have to be able to respond to the things around them. So they have to be able to respond to their environment. Like plants grow up towards the sunlight, animals run away from predators, they're responding to the things around them. They also have to have cells. So either they can have one cell and be a unicellular organism, or they can have many cells and be a multicellular organism. Living things grow and develop. So even if it's just one cell, that cell is going to grow in size and it's going to change over time. Multicellular organisms, organisms with many cells, grow and develop over time. Living things also have homeostasis. That just means that they keep their cells in balance. And living things require energy. It may be food or sunlight and water. Okay, now some of these are easy to see just with your eyes, but some of these you would need like a microscope or some lab experiments to test. Well, let's take a look here. So based on the rules I just talked about, are water particles in a river living things? Why or why not? Well, I already said that water is not living. So let's figure out why. Okay, let's go back to the rules. Do water particles reproduce? No, they don't reproduce. Do water particles respond to things around them? Well, you can move water particles around or you can heat them up, but they aren't trying to respond to their environment. Water particles are not cells. They're much smaller than cells, so they can't be living. Water particles also don't grow, they don't develop, they don't have homeostasis, and they don't really require energy, and they are water. Okay, how about mold? So mold is the fuzzy stuff that grows on rotten things. So if you've ever left like bread out too long, it gets kind of moldy. That's what mold is. So is it a living thing? Let's check. Okay, does mold reproduce? Well, yes, it does, right? We can get a lot of mold from just a little bit to start with. Does it respond to things around it? Well, yes. It'll grow on some things, but not others, right? So it wants to go places where it can have lots of food, like old bread. Is mold made of cells? Well, you'd have to look under a microscope to be sure or do some research. But I can tell you that yes, mold is made of cells. Does mold grow and develop? Well, it definitely does. If we leave bread out, we'll watch the mold grow on it. And it might even change colors. Okay, so it can develop over time. Do mold cells have homeostasis? Well, we can't really tell just by looking at it, but maybe we could do some research. And I can tell you that they do, but you'd have to do some research to be sure. Does mold require energy and water? Most definitely. It needs energy from the food it's consuming, the rotten bread, and it needs some water. If you had a perfectly dry environment, mold would not be able to grow. That's why oftentimes to preserve foods, people will dry them out, like dried fruit or dried meats. All right, so water particles are non-living. We explained why. Mold is living. We also explained why. So for the next one, I'm not going to answer this one for you. I think that you can probably figure this one out. Okay, how could a microscope help us know for sure if something is biotic or abiotic? Go ahead and think about that one. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is how do abiotic factors affect biotic factors. So I'm going to give you some scenarios, some word problems. And what I want you to do is figure out what's the abiotic factor, what's the biotic factor, and how is the abiotic factor affecting the biotic factor. I'm going to do the first one for you, and then I'm going to have you guys do scenario 2 and scenario 3 by yourself. Okay, so here's scenario 1. As summer turns to autumn, snakes start to move more slowly. This is because the temperature outside causes their body temperature to decrease. When their body temperature decreases, the snakes move slower. Okay, so the abiotic factor in this situation, so let's look for non-living things in here. We've got seasons, temperature, body temperature. Okay, well, it says causes right here. The temperature outside causes. Okay, so I think it's temperature. The abiotic factor in this situation is temperature. So now what's the biotic factor? What's the living thing? Well, there's only one living thing in here. It's the snake, right? So the biotic factor in this situation is the snake. So how does the temperature affect the snake? Well, the temperature affects the snake by changing how fast it can move, right? When the temperature is higher, the snake can move faster. When the temperature is lower, the snake moves slower. Here are a few more scenarios. I'm going to read them to you, but I want you to see if you can figure it out for yourself. Overnight, there's a huge thunderstorm with lots of rain. A grassy field next to the river ends up flooding. Some of the plants survive, but some of the trees drown and die. Okay, go ahead and pause the video, see if you can find the abiotic factor, the biotic factor, and the cause and effect relationship. Pause now. Okay, next scenario. A bird lives on a mountain and has its nest in a tree. One day, the bird goes out to look for a mate so it can have a family. Unfortunately, while the bird is gone, there is a mudslide, the tree falls over, and the bird's nest is destroyed. See if you can figure out the abiotic factor, the biotic factor, and how the abiotic factor is affecting the biotic factor. Pause now. All right, well, that's it for today. During today's lesson, you should have learned how to categorize things in an ecosystem as abiotic and biotic, especially using the rules we learned, right? Whether something is living. You should also be able to tell how abiotic factors affect biotic factors. If you're ready to check your knowledge, go ahead and take this quick quiz. If you want to learn more, go ahead and do some research on viruses. Are they alive or dead? And what is the evidence that supports your claim? Remember, science is all about asking questions, making mistakes, and learning from them. Until next time, let your curiosity lead.